part of that.
today's
I
topic
didn't
is,
know,
you know,
like,
yeah, I know,
and
that's
whatever. And I was just like, how come Hola.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? ¿Qué hubo?
Bien, ¿y tú?
Bien aquí, pasándola.
Acá nomás, welcome to the Spanish version of, no. Okay, Johnathan, so you're an actor.
True.
Tell me about that. I want to hear like about your current project. Because, hello, Gossip Girl.
Yeah. No, it is Gossip Girl. The cat's out of the bag.
Yeah.
No, I'm very proud to be on a show such as this version of Gossip Girl that it's not like performative diversity, for instance. Like it's such a mix of such different types of people. And so far, we've been we're in this unique position where we're also not like only whatever we're supposed to be or how we're projected to be. So it's just people being people, and they just happen to be from blank place or blank demographic or whatever. And today's topic is, you know, chisme, gossip. So it's like nice to like mix those two things together.
I grew up being called a chismosa.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite words of all time.
But for me, it wasn't a good thing.
Was not?
No. Well, now it is for me, right? But when I was a child, all of my tias and my relatives would be like, oh, like Yesika's una chismosa, like don't tell these stories in front of her or don't say anything because she's going to repeat them, right? So I grew up with this thing where like I was shamed for wanting to tell stories. You know, I'm a writer. That's what I do. And that's what I've been a writer my whole life. Yeah. But I grew up like being shamed for all of this stuff. And I like grew up, you know, with like all this stuff in my family, like an alcoholic dad and undocumented parents and blah, and all the stuff that happens when you have a huge Latinx family, right? And like I just had so many stories to tell. And it was just like, don't tell stories in front of Yesika because she's a chismosa. So for in my family, chisme has been a bad thing. How about in your family?
Yeah, for me growing up, like my mother calling me like chismoso, it always was so playful. And I knew that it was a thing that's like, oh, no sé, está chismoso, but it was like always in low stakes environments, like literally sniffing around at the soup that's being made. And then just be like, okay, you know, get out of here. Like you're.
But I was doing the same things. Do you think like our genders play different?
Very possibly, you know, because it, you know, chisme and even gossip, even in English-speaking worlds, still feels socially, it still feels like it's a chiefly like female thing. You know, I think in my experience, it's been like that's a. I'm not saying I believe this, but it's looked at as like it's a girl thing. Girls talk. Girls do the idle chat. They, you know, the hens clucking, all that blood curdling stuff that people say. But and it always unfortunately feels like this is not true. But whenever the men are around the table talking, then all of a sudden it has like this invented gravity because they're talking about something that's like really important, even though they're also just talking gossip, talking about what the neighbor is doing, like what their brother did, or like this other person back in their home country, or like whatever. So it doesn't strike me as odd at all that my version of being called chismoso growing up was like this lighthearted thing that had no stakes versus yours, where it's like she's going to print us in the paper, like she's going to ruin our reputations.
Yeah. I mean, like I remember that I had a piece that I wrote that was about one of my aunts jumping out a window and my uncle grabbing her by her hair and pulling her back in, right? And so this is a story that I always heard in bits and pieces about how my aunt está loca and like, esa es loca, whatever, right?
Yeah.
I grow up and I find out that she had just given birth to my cousin, so she was probably having some sort of postpartum stuff going on. And then also my uncle wasn't being the greatest husband at the time, right? So whatever this accumulations of things caused my aunt to like do something drastic to get people's attention. But for my whole life, she had been villainized, right? But you couldn't talk more of the story past the scandal because it was chisme and you were telling too much stories. And then, so I found out the whole story and I wrote a poem about it. And I published it somewhere or whatever. And my cousin, their youngest child, has a girlfriend, found the poem. The girlfriend broke up with him. Because the poem was about my uncle celebrating my cousin being mean to another girlfriend. And how it was just like, oh, this is what my family does. And this is how it happens over and over. And this is what the women in my family have had to survive. And so my cousin called me upset and he's just like, can you not write about me? Can you not write about us? And I was just like, yo, like, I didn't say any names. I didn't give any specifics. If your girlfriend knew it's you, there's something else going on.
Yeah.
Right? But like,
anybody.
Yeah. And so that's kind of what my relationship with chisme and gossip and all of that is just like, don't tell people like our deepest, darkest secrets because they might just know we're not perfect.
Things won't be written down if you don't hear it from somewhere. And that's like the biggest power that a writer has.
Yeah, and then like Gloria Steinem once said to me, name drop, but she once said to me the difference between history and past is that history gets written down and the past doesn't. So, but we can't create history if we don't have the stories of the past, right? And like I'm a poet and I come from spoken word and like spoken word, right? Like, and I think we forget that like conversation is an art form. It's a beautiful art form that I feel like many cultures have it. But, you know, I'm Latina, so I don't know other cultures. But it's like one of the most beautiful traditions that my family has. Sure. You know, like when you hang out with your wife and all your friends, right? And you start hearing all these stories or whatever, like, do you share those stories outside of that situation or do you keep that to yourself?
For me, and it sounds like you're a little bit like this, where I like being the sleuth in these situations. Like right away, I'm like, well, how much of this is true? You know, because if it doesn't go back to some level of truth, then I'm kind of out, me personally, because it feels like, well, or if there's no validity to this, then it's potentially damaging, or like, I don't know, I like that meaty stuff where it's just like, this is from an actual event, and if you don't know, then you don't know.
In my family, specifically, a man's secret is like, Yesika, why are you always telling everybody anything? But if I tell the story about my cousin who broke into her partner's apartment, everybody laughs. And then they're like, oh, you know, like, Yesika, you tell the best stories. Yeah. So it's like, okay, which ones can I tell and which ones I can't? And I'm a writer. Like, it's my job to keep the history of our family.
Yeah, and also, like, gossip is probably, like, the chief inspiration for writing for all time.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
And everything, like the best stories are always like, you know, I heard this part, like I wasn't there for the whole thing, but like, you know, piecing it together, blah, blah, and now it makes this like whole tale.
Ultimately, gossip, when you're telling the truth, is like liberation, right? And it's also protection. Listen to learn, not to respond.